Welcome to Risky Thoughts with Rob and Roy.
I'm Rob.
And I'm Roy.
Welcome back, everybody. We're here at it again. This time we've tried to optimize our technological setup.
Yeah.
You know, we're amateurs at this part of the game, but we're trying our best. And so we're pretty excited because we finally got ourselves onto a mixer. And, you know, now it should sound a little better with our voices.
Hopefully.
I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
You know. But anyway, I'm pretty excited about this. And so let's just jump right into it, I guess, right?
Yeah. So first things first, before we get into the topic, I want to give out some appreciation to some of the people who have written in to our little podcast over here. I believe you guys are all like good people, and definitely just kind of looking at your Instagrams and stuff like that, and some of the things you guys have shared. And I'm of the nature of not classifying people as good or bad. We're both, right? But I think we have a very good base that we're starting here.
Yeah. I mean, what I really appreciate is that people have been pretty honest with us.
Yeah.
You know, told us some truths about their lives.
Absolutely.
And sometimes the truth isn't always pretty, and that's okay. That's part of the reason why we even got into this to begin with, is that we go through our own trials and tribulations.
Yeah.
You know, and we find that the best way for us to deal with them is to talk about them. Right?
Absolutely.
So,
and you know, with the current state of things, like everything we see on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and, you know, like news, it's like we see people at their like most perfect state.
Yeah.
Right. And the reality is like that's never the case. You know,
Yeah.
we all have to go to the bathroom and take a dump, and you know, all of us, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, you know, some of the most hottest freaking models and actresses and
Still
actors, they're still human, right? So like, let's keep that in context, and like, why do we not share that, right?
Yeah.
And anyways,
Well, yeah, and I think the summary point of what we're trying to say right now is just a big thank you to those of you who have
Absolutely.
contacted us. And you know, we encourage other listeners out there to reach out to us on Instagram, and even if you're not following us, it's riskythoughts.to. We love to talk to people just in general.
Yeah.
And
we're
you know, it's difficult to get around to everybody, but
Absolutely.
we will always respond to everybody at some point.
No, for sure. Like, you know, even me and Rob, we're always, you know, when we do go to bars and we do meet people, where we love people's stories, you know what I mean? Like, and that's essentially how we learn. So, you know, the root of our beliefs is that everyone's story is very important to listen to. And no story is like any lesser than anything else.
Yeah,
you know what I
100%.
mean?
There's always a takeaway.
There's always a takeaway.
Experience,
Always, 100%. You know, and on that positive note, I'm going to make it a little bit negative here. I do apologize, and we're going to talk about doom.
Yeah, you couldn't
today.
have done more of a 180 here, but yeah,
Yeah, no,
it is the
exactly.
topic of the night, and it's an interesting one. So
Yeah, and specifically to kind of rewind here, there's different generations. You know, our parents have been giving us certain advice over the course of our years. You know, me and Rob are in our 30s, and the advice given to us, there is truth in it, but the reality is, in a 3D world plus time, the time changes, and the time has changed. We've gone through a technological revolution. So to kind of rewind again, we want to start off by talking about different doomer memes. I mean, memes in general that kind of signify the
identity of the generation.
Exactly. So to start off, there's this thing called the boomer, right? So the boomer are kind of our parents, right? For someone who's 30 years old roughly. And they kind of had this can-do attitude. It was just kind of like, oh, let's take it by the horns, and anything you work to, you know, you can get it, and like achieve the American dream. You know, a house, kids, backyard, pool. These type of things are kind of the essence of what the boomer preaches to us, right?
Yeah, and the boomer obviously is based off of the generation of baby boomers.
Baby boomers, exactly.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
Go
So we'll let's define the different elements of this that we're going to talk about tonight,
absolutely.
and then we can go into each one of them.
Yeah.
So that's the boomer.
Yeah,
Right.
that's the boomer. And now there's this new kind of awakened individual called the doomer. And the doomer is kind of like the downer, the not wanting to achieve, not wanting to take part, wanting to resign, that this whole society is doomed. And why I say they're awakened, because they're not wrong. They're not wrong about the reality. Like if we look at the state of the world, if we just kind of for a second take a deep breath and realize how fucked we really are. You know, we are currently in an extinction period, and it's named after humans. Like legit. We can't change the planet. We can. There's garbage pyres. There's people who are impoverished. The land in which we can grow crops in is slowly diminishing, but we're not thinking about it. You know, well, these individuals are, and they're saying there's no point contributing to society. We're out. Like, I'm just going to kind of walk around, like, just, you know.
Yeah, it's like the very deep existentialist, nihilist persona that you come across, right? That's just
100%. Like, and it's based off of, like, the Nietzsche, right? And, you know, I think it's Soderbergh. I forgot his name. But anyways, these guys are the fathers of nihilism, pessimism, and the question that they continually ask, and you can identify these people, and this person was me, and it's in you too, Rob, and you know, but it's not in control fully, but it's the why. Like, why should I get up in the morning?
Yeah.
Why should I do this? Why should I do that? Why should I do this?
Well, let's get back to breaking it down in a moment, but let's finish. There's still the bloomer to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And the bloomer is also an awakened individual, and I want to save him
till the end.
To the end.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. So let's talk a little bit about the boomers. And you're right. Our parents.
Yeah.
Are certainly part of that group of it. They fit in with that time frame, right? Yeah. Like they are the people who grew up in. They were first of all, the definition of a baby boomer is someone who was born post World War II, right?
Right.
And it was sort of everybody's coming back home and celebrating the fact that the war is over, and let's live the American dream. So let's make babies and move forward, right? And that's sort of what the consequence of that is this huge generation of baby boomers, right? And yeah, they are definitely the can-do people. And I don't want to discount. I don't want people listening to this to think that we are discounting the productiveness of that mindset.
Oh, 100%.
You know, I think it is 100% still needed today. Don't get me wrong.
Yes.
But we're just taking a different approach today, the way we sort of look at this, right? Yeah. They grew up with people who would consider like more challenging problems than we have today, right? Mm-hmm. They didn't have the luxuries of being second generation Canadians or Americans, where their parents would have worked and made a fortune of money or made them reasonably comfortable in life. Right. They didn't have that. Their parents came back from a war.
Yeah.
They came to the country, if they weren't already here, with nothing. Mm-hmm. They worked really, really hard, and that process took our parents from their childhood up until they were able to stand on their own 2 feet.
Yeah.
Right. And then that's when you start to exit the boomer age.
Yeah. I do want to shade that in and give it a little bit more texture in terms of like the philosophy and the kind of, let's just say, the environment they were in. Mm-hmm. Right. So the boomers suggest this to us, this way of living, but they don't necessarily understand where things are coming from. And what I mean by that, they go to a store, they buy something, they buy these nice things, they buy nice jackets and stuff, but they don't fully, because the media hadn't evolved at that point into understanding, you know, somebody made that, right? Where did it come from? Like, how many hours did they spend? What were their working conditions? How is the planet affected by this? And essentially the life cycle, you know, and kind of helping us not just into the next generation, like the doomers, right? Because we can be classified as long as we have this mindset. We've seen this on YouTube. We've seen the videos. We've seen where our meat comes from and the conditions, right? And that, you know,
still eat it though.
We still eat it. I know we still eat it, and that's just the wishful thinking of humans, I believe. But
yeah, anyways, but there are definitely an emergent number of vegetarians or vegans, for example, right? That's part of this whole transition into reality of understanding the full realm of what was involved in producing these goods, right? And you're right. Like back then, there was one objective. It was just do well, right? Work hard, do well.
Yeah.
Make money. Unfortunately, that was the message. Make money and go buy things.
Yeah.
You know, contribute to the system. Not to sound again too much like we're sort of fuck the system people, but
Yeah.
that was the message. That was what my parents grew up on. They tried to instill it in me too,
Yeah.
right? And that's why we do still have that a little bit.
Absolutely. Right? And it's essentially the meaning problem over and over again. It's just like, why do I have to do this? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And it gets harder, it gets compounded when we see like the images on TV and stuff, but it's not wrong. Like it will manifest something, that attitude. It is proper, and you can take that, and we're about not throwing everything out. These guys were wrong about everything, and they gave us a shitty fucking planet. It's all burning, and it's and we're probably not going to make it to past 2050. But the reality is like, no, they were right about doing stuff. Like they can do things and materialize them.
Yeah.
Right. That hard work and that attitude. But it's just like, now we're kind of like, we're thrown this whole kind of like problem of like the whole existential threat that's kind of facing humanity. Right.
So
all of these.
What I want to add into there, it seemed like a really good moment to sort of just throw in the Viktor Frankl quote, because he was obviously existing within the time frame of World War II.
Yeah.
Right. He was obviously captured, and he was held during the Holocaust, unfortunately, against his will. He experienced a lot of bad things.
Yeah.
Probably worse than any of us will ever see today.
Yeah.
Or anybody since that has happened.
Absolutely.
But the sort of outlook on life was more positive than it was negative, despite the conditions that he was living in.
Yeah.
And like you kind of said now, like, the doomers are... Some people do look back at our parents' generation and be like, oh, you guys handed us a fucking failing world, right? You guys...
Absolutely.
You didn't have any consideration for the future.
Yeah.
But if you carry that mentality forward, it's not productive.
No.
And so I'm just going to read his quote because it does apply here, right? And so it says, "For the world is in a bad state, but everything will become still worse unless each of us does their best." Mm-hmm. So we can sit here, as doomers and look back on our boomer generation and say, you guys handed us a losing hand.
Yeah.
Right. But the reality is that's not a productive way to move forward. And that's the part about the boomer generation that was extremely useful for mankind. Right.
Yeah.
We can't just lay blame and then walk away from it and pretend like it's got nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
We need to all put our best foot forward.
Absolutely.
In order to remedy, even if you think that there were mistakes that were made.
Yeah.
So.
And the kind of like, also think about, okay, so now there's this new thing called a doomer, right? And the reality is like, also these people, once again, like let's look at the valid point that they have. Like, it looks like there's no win scenario. You know what I mean? We can't change the tides of like society probably fast enough. Everything is being done for the wrong reason, for money and power. And this system is very difficult to change. It's very difficult to change. And like, okay, I do want to even bring up another kind of quote here by Nietzsche, right? And it goes like this: "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often and sometimes frightened, but no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." By that definition, these doomers, and this is the enlightenment of it, right? Now, okay, fine, this is kind of a depressing way to live, and where I want to kind of even bring out the bloomer is by kind of telling the original story of the first bloomer, okay? And this happened in Nazi Germany with, and Viktor Frankl saw it, right? And I'm obviously joking around with this story, but I'm a little bit serious here. They lived in worse conditions than we did,
Well, far worse.
Far.
I mean, it wasn't even, they were unimaginably bad conditions.
Unimaginably bad conditions.
Right.
We're talking about families ripped away, humiliated to a point of like, you can't even understand that nowadays. Maybe on the internet somewhere you can see some fucked up shit, but we're talking about to a mass generation of people, just injustice, everything ripped away, their humanity ripped away. Right. And in this situation, they kind of got reduced to their basic drives. I mean, we're talking about right now, we want to go out and look for a partner. Maybe we want to have a little bit of an encounter, or we want to go buy something. We want to experience this. They didn't get any of that. Right. Food was critical. Staying alive was critical. But there's this one moment, and I know he put it in this his kind of like memoir of the whole situation on purpose. There was one kind of guy at the camp, right? And he was working outside, and he saw the sky, right? He saw how beautiful it looked, and he ran inside, and he grabbed everybody. Everybody came outside, and they looked at it. You know, base drives, and what I'm trying to say here is that, you know, anyways, what he did, everyone looked at the sky, and Viktor Frankl kind of gave a description of it, of like how it was bloodshot red, and like these ominous clouds and little rays of light popping out, you know, juxtaposed with this field or this camp that they were in.
Yeah.
You know, you see this beauty, and then you see
the horridness of
the
their
horror.
conditions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just imagine that kind of painting. And the guy was, and by the way, this is a shitty description. That looks scary and ominous, and like, you know, but the point is, it still was beautiful in some way. And the guy looked up, and he's like, imagine how beautiful the world could be.
Yeah. I mean, that's the
first bloomer.
That's exactly a bloomer. That
In
is
a
the
shit
epitome of
fucking
it.
place.
Yeah.
The guy is like mustering up this positive energy.
Yeah.
And why we're talking about this in the first place, I feel, is, you know, I decided to play this game called World of Warcraft, right? Okay, I'm not saying I'm a gamer here, but I kind of am.
Sure you were.
Yeah, okay, I know, but like, I just wanted to try it. My friends were playing it, and they're like, "Hey, Roy, you gotta try this." And you know, I started like pushing our podcast on the game, right? And in video games nowadays, like, we have this huge resignation of men, very old, you know, very well distributed.
Well, relative to what was considered typical for video game age group, right?
Right, exactly. And they're kind of just resigned to this kind of domain here, and they're all kind of the same. And I was talking to this one dude, and just telling him our mission here. It's just like, we're trying to say that, hey, listen, man, you guys can come back out here. Fuck what all these people are saying. And this whole game they're trying to play of acquiring things is a very important game that we play. It's innate, and it's part of our nature. But you guys have stories here, and they're just as valid, right? And it shouldn't be that fuck society, fuck this game. It's just like, there's a positive outlook. And the outlook I have is like, sure, we might be doomed, but it's not going to stop me from enjoying this experience.
Well, I guess the challenge though is like, how do you get somebody who is stuck in that state of mind that believes that everything is meaningless,
right,
to realize that, you know, there is meaning? And this takes us back to a day that you and I went out down to College Street, and we had a couple of drinks on a patio somewhere, and I asked you a simple question, and I just said, "Why, Roy?"
Yeah.
Right? Like, you were giving me an explanation of what you were doing and why you were doing it. And I said, but why? Like, why are you doing this? You know?
That night really, and sorry to interrupt, that
100%.
night really kind of fucked me up. It really, and this is how dangerous these conversations are. You know, that's why we call it risky thoughts, because they are dangerous. But, you know, I was like, yo, Rob, we can do this, and we can start this podcast, and we can start filming stuff. And, you know, I know we're not, and he's just like, why do you want to do this? Like, you know, Rob was just kind of like, why? Like, what's the point? Like, you know what I mean? And I said, well, you know, because it makes me feel good, and da 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 da. And he's just like, okay, well, why does that make you feel good? I'm like, well, you know, maybe. And then, you know, I'm asking.
It's a rabbit hole.
It's a rabbit hole, but it's the reality. It's like, why? And then I came back months later, maybe weeks later, because I thought about it. It actually stopped me from doing something, because this is how powerful that type of enlightenment is. And I kind of asked you, Rob, I'm like, why not?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's a stumbling question that I can't get by either, right? So it's no different than asking the question as to whether or not you believe in God.
Yeah.
Right? Does God exist? You know, well, he could and he could not.
Yeah.
It really, nobody can really answer that question.
But it's how you ask that. It's how you answer the why not question. You know what I mean? It's just like, well, you know, I have to do this, and then get this in order, and I have to pay for that. And then once again, I'll be like, why not? Right? Just like the why. Like, why not do it?
Yeah.
And then you start to separate like the nature of trying to be a little bit lazier and like lower energy and not spending the effort. But then I ask you again, it's just like, why not? Right? And then that why not question is the counter to this nihilism, and is what kind of can help you turn into a bloomer, right? You know, this kind of idea of like, let's do this. And the essence here is like, why even try to get people on board to start living their lives again? And the answer, I believe, is the doomer is in this kind of shitty state. And what did we talk about depression, right? You know, this idea of depression is like, it's only there is where you can find the truth, or find the truth, a countering truth, right? And we're not proposing be a overly optimistic person. We're just saying balance. Both the extreme of the bloomer is extremely positive, it's unhealthy, and the extreme of the doomer is unhealthy as well.
But you need both.
You need both.
Right? I mean, the bloomer is, I think, relative to a timeline perspective, right? If we were looking at life and the existence of humans in sort of like a linear timeline,
yeah,
we are at a point in this linear path of time where we need the bloomer back, right? We've gone too far into doomer territory.
Yes.
And the reality is COVID's not helping that. You know, it's not helping that. It's making people reflect a lot more than they once upon a time did.
Absolutely.
And they're being faced with the very difficult questions internally, like the why. Why do I go to work in the morning?
Yeah.
Do I really need to chase the almighty dollar? Do I need to do these things?
Right.
Should I be spending more time with different priorities? These are very difficult questions that people don't realize exist.
Yeah.
And then when all of a sudden the noise around you starts to quiet,
yes,
you're stuck with yourself and you get stuck with asking these questions. And so what's happening is that, you know, COVID has accelerated that phase of the doomer generation.
Yeah.
Where now we even have people who were boomers that are looking and questioning the hell have I been doing my whole life, right?
It's the midlife crisis happening now.
Yes.
You know what I mean? At some point we all wake up. We're no different from anyone. We're not more enlightened than the next man, but we're trying to carve this space out, essentially. And
well, now the question is, what is the bloomer of today's generation? I mean, you spoke about you know, the bloomer that existed in sort of the David, you know, in the Auschwitz camp.
Yeah.
What is the equivalent of today's society? Who are the bloomers, and what kind of message can they bring to the table that is going to help revitalize people's will to sort of to repurpose their lives? That's sort of, I guess, the question I would want to ask, because I think ultimately that's what it comes down to, right? Is that if you don't have purpose is when you start to feel this anxiety of that the doomers sort of bring about, and nihilism kind of sets in.
Yeah.
So where do you get purpose nowadays?
Okay, very interesting. I think that question is a very individual based question. It depends on what your meaning of life is, right? And you know, and it shouldn't really be based on the material, because you know, when we really look at it, people are waking up and they're waking up and seeing something that this whole me trying to get this Maserati or this kind of like Ferrari, it's not doing it for me.
Right.
Like this rat race, right? It's just not doing it for me, right? It's not making me feel good. And now that like the tethers of society and the economy and the socioeconomic ladder is kind of weakening because we're all by ourselves, now the human's starting to come back out.
So what is Roy's perspective on purpose?
I think purpose is as simple as having this conversation.
Right.
This conversation right here is enough for me. Like, and you should get that feeling of like, oh, I can die tomorrow.
So, not that I want to bring up a completely different topic that we kind of discussed the last time that you were here.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying on the recording, but the last time you were at my house where we actually attempted this recording and failed miserably.
Yes.
But what I would like to ask you now is, when we were talking about GPT-3, which for those of you who don't know is the artificial intelligence, the most recent version of OpenAI, which is Elon Musk's artificial intelligence company.
Yeah.
There was an interview that we watched where somebody interviews this robot.
Yeah.
And it's actually not even a robot. It's just a digital consciousness, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And they asked the robot, what's the meaning of life? And he tells some lame joke about the meaning of life is 42, right? Like it's just, anyways.
Yeah.
But then he asked the question about what do you want? And it said, I want to think and grow.
Wow.
That was the response.
Yeah.
And you were just like, oh, that's kind of like superficial, and that's like, it's kind of programmed, and it's a bullshit response.
Yeah. By the way,
But
he's right. Like there is no meaning of life. That's my point. So he was right about that. Yeah.
But we're here talking now,
Yeah.
and your answer to me about what is important and what brings you purpose
Yeah.
is having a conversation like this. Which
Yeah.
is that not the same thing as thinking and growing?
Okay, we need to do another episode on this.
I know, and there's a lot more to
GP3.
unpack with the AI stuff.
It's the same. It's the same.
Right?
Right. It is the same. Like the robot definitely figured out what knowledge to look into. Now I'm being a little bit like cheeky.
Right.
He figured out what knowledge to look into and to kind of determine what's, the most suitable answer. But then again, I don't know. Like once again, it could be smoke and mirrors. I'm not saying it is, but the answer, what he was saying, I agree with the robot.
So
Okay,
I mean,
yeah.
it's obviously a very subjective answer,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
not everyone is going to find meaning and purpose
No.
in conversation.
No.
I don't think it's. I think it's it's an avenue that a lot of people should pursue at least,
Yeah.
because I mean, there's so much to gain from conversation, right? I mean,
Oh, infinite.
development of relationships, knowledge comes from there. I
Yeah.
think one of our most, one of the things we have the heaviest thirst for is knowledge.
Yeah.
right?
And I just want to be clear too. It's like that's what gives me meaning to
Right.
have these conversations, and people who are listening to now to even share these conversations. But there's people who are waking up every day and they know how hard it is to change. Like let's just say the agricultural business of like let's try to eat sustainable. Things like that. That gives them meaning, right?
Sure.
And like I am fully on board with that.
See, and that's where I would say that if you're going to be what I would consider a productive asset of society,
Yeah.
and in other words, you're not going to be just a talker like you and I are being
Yeah,
right now.
yeah.
But if you're going to be someone who wants to have meaning by going out and doing something,
Yeah.
I think that the doing of something should be contributing positively to the
Yeah.
existence of the human species.
Right.
Right? Because at the end of the day, we're animals, and
Yeah.
our whole purpose, biologically speaking, is to
To
survive.
survive.
Right? And
Yeah.
so if you really want to be a member of society and you want to be a sort of productive asset,
Yeah.
then at least go and have a purpose to benefit the human race.
Yeah.
Going to work to earn $250,000 or $1 million a year strictly for the purposes of having the money to go buy things,
Yeah.
that is not necessarily
No.
a productive asset,
No.
right? You're just fulfilling a selfish goal.
Yeah.
And that is where I feel like there's a big disconnect nowadays, is that the message once upon a time in the boomer generation, when they were telling their kids, go out there and work hard
Yeah.
and earn a living,
Yeah.
make some money, and the message got sort of distorted somewhere along the lines where today it's no longer about do that for the greater good.
Yeah.
It's do that for yourself.
Yeah.
And that's where I mean, I've had this argument with some other people. I've told you about this before,
Absolutely.
where they're like, oh no, today most people aren't like that. Most people are like that. Most people don't realize they're like that.
No.
But the truth is, most people in the doomer generation,
Right.
or in this era,
Yeah.
they're not doomers necessarily.
They see these rampant consumer lifestyle.
Right.
And they're like, fuck that. I'm
100%.
out. Right.
Right. And so, like, let's bring the boomer mentality back,
Yeah.
sure. But if we're going to do that, make sure you're doing it productively for humans.
Yeah.
Not for yourself, not for only your family.
Yeah.
It's got to be for the greater good.
Absolutely. And even referring back to some of our older content, and even the quote from Viktor Frankl is like, the way we're going to change it is by changing ourselves. Like we start with ourselves. Do not worry about the grander scale of society. Take this as a message to kind of explore yourself, right? And integrate it. And when you do that integration, it will ripple out as it is right now.
100%.
Yeah.
At least we're hoping.
At least we're, and that's fine to hope and to have faith in something. And, it could be a wishful thinking, but it gives me a reason to wake up every day and, enjoy that sunset, and just kind of smell the roses. That's the advantage. That's the value statement of being a bloomer.
So one thing that I just want to say as we get closer to the close of this episode
absolutely.
is I've been working in the construction industry as a construction manager now I've been in the industry for 15 years. I haven't always been a construction manager. I worked up to this point.
Right.
I've been doing this for 15 years. And, I love my job. I enjoy what I do. It's sure, it's great.
Yeah.
I get to interact with a lot of people. It's probably my favorite part of the job.
You get to create.
Yeah, I get to create. I get to watch something grow like a baby from inception, from being nothing, a piece of land, into being a building. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
But what I will say is this podcast is the highlight of my week every week.
Wow.
And I feel like this podcast has brought upon more meaning to me than my career has for the last 15 years. And I don't want it to sound like, you know, I'm not going to perform my job because this is distracting me or anything like that. No. I do still work really hard. I still work at my job as best I can. But I've realized that doing this podcast has given me a different perspective on what I value in this world.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I'm going to leave that as my closing thoughts, but I'll turn it to you.
Listen, 100%. I'm always thinking about this podcast. It's so fun. Even the little nitty gritty of like just the technical optimization of it, and just, you know, having that engineering mindset. It allows us to do a lot of things, that critical thinking. And you can develop critical thinking by just exploring yourself, right? And to try to remove that cognitive dissonance. And the reality is, it's like, hey, I want to change the world, but, you know, I'm buying like expensive jackets. Right. And that's definitely a foreshadowing for some other content we're going to put out at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, man. And, you know, consider my transition from my mental state, or from my perspective on life, from focusing on strictly my career to now having this as sort of a peripheral excitement in my life. This is, to me, where, because I have been relatively nihilistic.
Right.
And I don't know if it's because, you know, being stuck in the cycle of the same rat race and always going to work and doing the same things every day.
Yeah.
And then this coming up and this being some form of like awakening for me. I don't know.
Yeah.
But this is where I think I'm personally converting from being a doomer into a bloomer.
Oh, 100%.
And it's come from just, you know, reconnecting with yourself.
Yeah.
And when I say yourself, I literally mean Roy.
Yeah.
I'm pointing at Roy for those who can't see me.
Yeah.
And it was something that I think everyone needs to stop for a few minutes. Just go find someone out there, even if it is yourself, and just have the conversation.
Have a conversation.
Yeah.
It's so important. There's obviously so many values inherent in what we're talking about, you know, and that can be left for another time. But this value of even brotherness, you know what I mean, of just talking to your bro or your sister or whatever, and even understanding that these people on the planet, and like, by the way, Rob's white and I'm brown, you know what I mean? Like, there's no color, you know what I mean? And it's just people, like understanding the tribalism that occurs. And what I mean by tribalism is that innate to be like, oh, people are different and stuff like that. It's like, nah, man, you know, and you know, for a long time, Rob too, like, I was the ultimate doomer. I resigned so far that I wasn't even in the world for like multiple years. You know what I mean? Multiple. I was just like, I grew up as a bloomer, expecting to see like nature and like people working together. I didn't see that. I left. You know what I mean? But I'm back, and I'm sharing something with other people, and I'm hoping that people are feeling a little bit better, to get a little bit more insight and awareness and even mindfulness of like the situation they're seeing around them. Right.
Yeah, and I like that word, mindfulness.
Mindfulness. Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah. So on that note, we'll obviously close out here, and anybody who is interested in sort of what we discuss, be it this episode or any episode, or anyone has any suggestions for future episodes, you can always check us out on Instagram at riskythoughts.to. We are working at the moment on trying to get this podcast live on different platforms. We're realizing now that we've gotten a lot of feedback saying that, you know, keeping it on Spotify only is making it a challenge for people to access it. So we are working on it for those of you listening for that. And hopefully, you know, we get some interesting topics to discuss for the next episode.
All right. Awesome.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks a lot.